Good evening, 34th PTA. Thank you for joining us for our Summer Series training webinar. I'm Erin Hester, your 34th District PTA President. While we wait for this presentation to begin, I just wanted to point out that if you have any questions during this presentation, you can enter them into the chat feature and we have someone monitoring that chat for you. If you are joining us at a later date, you can always reach us at 34thpta.org, click on the Contact Us tab, and you can email any of our board members. Thank you for being here tonight, and we will begin this presentation shortly. Every bloody time I do this, and I just reminded myself to unmute, and then I didn't. See, we're all human, guys. We all make mistakes. Good evening, 34th District PTA. I once again forgot to unmute myself. Welcome to our webinar on how to run a meeting. If you're just tuning in with us, I wanted to point out that if you have any questions during our presentation, go ahead and enter them into the chat feature, and our parliamentarian, Heather Ippolito, is monitoring that chat for us. I just want to also note that for this webinar, we're not delving into specific positions of any type. We're going to be having more training on that coming. What we want to give you is just kind of the step-by-step in planning and running a meeting, whether that's your executive board meeting or your association meeting. So let's start with some introductions. I'm Erin Hester, your district PTA president. I've been involved in PTA for, I don't know, over 15 years now, I believe. And like many of our new leaders, I didn't know the first thing about PTA when I started 15 years ago. But through training and experience, I'm here today to be able to share my knowledge and expertise with you. So thank you all, experienced and inexperienced, for the willingness to learn and keep on learning. And welcome to the 2020-2021 term. Presenting with me tonight is Leslie Powell, our first Vice President of Leadership. Leslie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good evening, everybody. I am Leslie Powell, and I am the EVP of 34th District PTA. I also have been doing PTA for a long time, and I've held many different positions from units to council to district. And I'm excited to be here and to share a little bit about how to make your meetings go smoothly. And please know that we are always here whenever you need us to answer any of your questions.
I almost did it again. All right, thank you, Leslie. Adrian Haas was going to be presenting with us tonight too, but unfortunately she could not make it. So we're going to go ahead and proceed. One last time, just in case you're just now dropping or just now joining us, please enter your questions and your comments into the chat feature on YouTube, and we will be happy to answer them. Towards the end of this presentation, we'll have some time for question and answer. So we'll begin our presentation.
So before you even start the meeting, there are lots of different things that you can do to set yourself up for success. You might as well get all your ducks in a row, so to speak, so that you're ready to go and don't have any bumps along the way. So this slide kind of lists a lot of different things, but it's all the things that you do ahead of time. So before you even step foot into the room. So the first thing is your agenda. When you're talking about an association meeting, you are required to post your agenda 10 days prior to the meeting. You need to include the date, the time, the location on your agenda. And by posting it, you can physically post it somewhere on a bulletin board if you have one. You can put it on your social media, your website, send it out in the school newsletter, in an email, but it needs to be posted 10 days prior. Executive board meetings are different. With the agenda for the executive board meeting, you can just distribute it to your executive board members prior to the meeting. So you can just send it in an email to them. Now, during this time where we're finding ourselves doing a lot of virtual meetings, it is okay to go ahead and email that agenda, whether it's association or executive board, to your members so that they have it. Then the next thing you need to do is prepare all of the materials that you're going to need for your meeting. First of all, you need a list of every member of your PTA. You need that because those are the people that are allowed to speak. So you need to have that on hand. You need to make sure that you have a translator scheduled if necessary, or have your materials translated so that your whole community can participate. It's a really good idea to find a hook. You want to have as many members there as possible. So if you're in person, you can do things like have a class come down and perform, or a whole grade level come down and perform. And then maybe you'll get all of the second grade parents there for your meeting as well to watch their kids perform and then participate in your meeting as well. You could have a combination of a meeting and a family event of some sort. You could also have a guest speaker. So any of those things work to increase your attendance. The other thing that's really important is to notify anybody, whether it's a member, a teacher, administrator, whoever might be a part of your agenda. They need advance warning to let them know that they are going to be speaking at this meeting, so that when they get there, you don't just say, surprise, your turn to speak. You need to make sure that they're prepared. You need to advertise your meeting for association meetings. So a lot of people will choose to hang big banners. They will put reminders on social media, emails, things like that. The other couple of things that you need to prepare are your minutes and your treasurer's report. Your minutes will come from your secretary, and they are the minutes from the previous meeting. And you should have enough copies on hand for everybody who's in attendance. And the same goes for the treasurer's report. The treasurer's report is dated from the last meeting to the day before this current meeting. And you also need to have copies of that on hand for everybody who's in attendance. During this time, now that we're doing these virtual meetings, a lot of units are choosing to send out invitations to the meeting, and then once the members respond that they're going to attend, they send them the materials for the meetings. The other thing that we've seen done is once members get to the virtual meeting, they'll use the chat feature and they'll post a link in the chat feature that will be of the minutes and or treasurer's report. So any of those things are acceptable, but you need to make sure you have them. You also need to make sure you have a sign-in sheet. If you're physically in a room meeting, have your members sign a sheet saying that they're in attendance. If you are doing a virtual meeting, again, we're recommending that you use the chat feature, have people type in their name so that you can make sure that they're all members and count for them so that you have met quorum and you can show that you've met quorum, and then make sure you save that chat feature. And finally, you can consider offering some type of hospitality item. So if you're in a physical meeting, you can have coffee and pastries or waters and crackers and cheese or whatever your unit decides to do. But it's nice to offer something to make people feel at home. Okay, Heather or Erin.
Thought I had muted that time, but I wasn't. All right, thank you. So the agenda, we're going to delve more into the actual agenda, what's on it, why it's important. So the president usually is the one who creates the agenda because the president's the one that chairs the meetings. When you prepare your agenda, you want to refer to your calendar for upcoming events to discuss. You can also consult with your board members if there's anything they'd like to discuss at the meeting that you haven't already included in the agenda. There's two types of meetings: your executive board meeting that are held every month, and then the association meeting that could be held monthly, but usually are held less frequently than once a month, and your bylaws stipulate when your association meetings are held. The agenda for these meetings will look different for each type of meeting, and they'll look different from meeting to meeting. But here are some basic things you should have on each of your agendas. So first, the name of your unit. That's the unit is the school PTA name. So Enterprise PTA, Emblem Academy PTA, that's the name of your unit. You want the date and time and place of your meeting. So right now we're meeting virtually, and we'll probably continue to meet this way for the next couple months. So your location would be via Zoom or via Google Hangouts or whatever platform you're using. And that just lets us know that it's not a physical location, that we are meeting online. And these items are the title of your agenda. And then the first item in your agenda would be your call to order when you're actually going to start your meeting. So president would usually say, I call this meeting to order at 7:06 p.m. or whatever time you're starting your meeting. And you usually wait until your secretary is ready to take the minutes before you just start. The next item on your agenda could be your Pledge of Allegiance. That would be part of, say, your opening ceremonies. It could be introducing the board. Those are different things that you would do. Another item on the agenda could be a quorum check, and this is usually done at an association meeting. This is when the parliamentarian confirms that the quorum is met in order to hold business of the meeting. And the quorum is the number of members that must be present in your meeting in order to have business happen, which is to make motions and to vote the things that the approval you need. Those are things that you need quorum in order to do. The next item on your agenda would be the reading of the minutes, or sometimes we call it the secretary's report. And like Leslie said, if you provide copies to your attendees, the secretary doesn't have to read the entire set of minutes. If they don't have copies, or you don't put it up on the screen for them, or they don't have access to look at the minutes, then your secretary, unfortunately, is going to have to read the entire thing. So the attendees would read the minutes over really quickly, look them over, especially those who might have been at the meeting last time, make any corrections if necessary, and then those minutes are approved either as read or as corrected. For the association meeting, your secretary is going to report it's going to present what we call a executive board report. And that basically is just a summary of all the motions made by the executive board in between the last association meeting to the meeting that you're having. This is only done in the association meeting because you're bringing all the business of the executive board to the association. And when they approve that business, they've approved everything that you have worked so hard to do. Next item on the agenda would be the treasurer's report. And again, if copies are provided, the treasurer just has to read the beginning balance, total income, total expenses, just those totals they need to present. If the treasurer report isn't provided, the treasurer is going to have to read the entire report. So it's always important to make sure you have those copies, like Leslie said, for everyone to see or give them access to see them. Also make sure when you are emailing those reports that you're emailing them in a PDF so that people cannot change the reports. If you're sending them through Google or you're sending them through Word, those things can be, altered and changed. So it's always best to send them as a PDF. What the treasurer also does is they will ratify their checks at an association meeting, not just approving all the checks that were written within the time from the last association to the next one. And that's done through a motion. And then you have items on your agenda like the president's report, the committee reports, any unfinished business, things that you had discussed at prior meetings, but you never finalized. Any new business that hasn't been discussed already, any announcements such as upcoming events, when your next meeting would be held, things that your audience or your attendees should know. And then lastly, you adjourn. And that's the time in which you officially end your meeting. Other things that could be part of the agenda is going to depend on the time of year. Your beginning of the year is going to be pretty heavy because you have a bunch of things to approve, such as like on the screen, the annual financial report, your audit, your budget, your calendar, those types of things. The audit, the budget, and the calendar, we approve at the end of the year and we approve at the beginning of the year. And we do that because sometimes during the summer, things change. Also, you have new members that may have not been there the year before that are now there beginning of the year. So it's transparency and it's just it's basically ratifying those decisions and keeping everybody up to date. So other things you might have would be elections, which happen once a year, electing the nominating committee, special committees, and those are usually committees that just have like one job or one event. Things maybe like Red Ribbon Week, Harvest Festival, those would be special committees. They would only come at certain times of the year to your meetings. And then we also have, sometimes there's a need for a timed agenda. And if you're in a meeting that's lasting hours and hours, and it seems like it tends to get out of hand, it's okay to use a timed agenda. And that's where everything on the item is timed or scheduled so that everything stays on point. Everyone has a certain amount of time to speak. The meeting stays concise and timely. And so that's just an option too for those who feel like your meetings just get kind of out of hand. If you want more information on a timed agenda, we'd be happy to talk with you and share some of our experience with those as well. You can always reach out to us. So here's an example of an agenda, and Leslie was kind enough to draft this for us, and she modeled it as to what your first association meeting agenda might look like. And I know I talked a lot about association and not so much about executive board agendas, but association is where all the final approval happens. Your executive board, you're going to have a lot of the similar things that you would have association, your secretary's report, your treasurer's report, your committee reports, things like that. You're going to present all your documents like you normally would first to your executive board and then to your association. So you still approve the calendar and the budget and your audit and all those things. Those happen in executive and association. But this is just a good example of kind of how busy your first meeting might be. And it's still something that you can get through in within about an hour if you're on time and you're concise and you're just moving through the business. But like I said earlier, you want to basically ratify your calendar and your budget, even though you may have approved those back in May or June. You want to bring them back to the association when you first meet in August. So this is just a sample of what an association, just agenda may look like, association or not. And there are more examples of agendas on California State PTA's website as well. And that is capta.org, capta.org. That's another good place to go for resources. So that's just a summary on agendas. And now I'm going to turn things over to Leslie to talk more about meetings.
Okay, so now you have everything ready. You're ready to go. You're walking in that room. What do you expect? So here are some things to help you get through your meeting. If you're a new president in particular, or new to your office as secretary or treasurer, especially those three, meetings are sometimes intimidating, but they really don't need to be. So the more prepared you are, the better things will go. So our first suggestion at an association meeting is to have somebody whose only job is to greet people who are attending. So station them at the door or have them be unmuted if you're using a virtual platform. And as people enter, they're welcoming people, they're making contact, they're asking them to sign in, they're pointing to the table where they can find the materials that they need for the meeting, showing them that there are beverages and snacks available if they want something. Just that is their only job. Make sure that every single person who walks through the room feels welcome. Also, during your meeting, talk to your executive board members ahead of time and ask them to spread out through the room. You don't want your entire executive board to cluster in one corner of your room, because that's when you kind of start to get that whole PTA click vibe going, and nobody wants that or needs that. You want everybody to feel like they're have an equal voice in that room. So spread out and get to know somebody new. Also, make sure that you are starting and ending your meeting on time. You need to respect everybody's time. And if you say you're starting at 8 a.m. and you start at 8:40, people are going to be angry and they're not going to come back. So make sure that you're starting and ending at the time that you said you would. Here's a tip that some people don't ever think to do until somebody mentions it, and that is that it's okay for you to use a script until you're comfortable or forever. If you need to write it all down on a piece of paper so that you don't forget any step, there's nothing wrong with that. It'll make you more comfortable and it'll make your meeting more smooth. There are sample scripts that you can find on CAPTA's website, but sometimes it's easier if you just kind of type it out yourself because you know your unit and you know what's happening and you know what's coming up. So that's fine. It's also a good idea to have your treasurer and your secretary, the people who speak at every meeting, kind of do the same thing. If at every meeting, your treasurer has to move to ratify checks and it just slips their mind every time, if they have it written down on their paper, ratify checks numbers, they'll remember to do it. It is just a little crutch to help them. Same thing with your secretary. You can write out the executive board recommends and I move to, and then they read the executive board recommendations. It makes everybody a little bit more comfortable. So I am a big proponent of scripts, and I think that a lot of people use them and really come to rely on them, and it's a really good tool. Again, have your membership list available, because at an association meeting and an executive board meeting, only members are allowed to participate in the debate and the vote. So if you're not a member, you don't get a vote. And if there's something that you're voting on and it's a close vote, you need to make sure that all of the people voting are members. It's always a really good idea to leave a little bit of time at the end of your meeting for questions and answers. Some people like to do questions and answers as you go. That's fine. It's kind of up to you, however you like to do it, whatever works best, as long as it doesn't throw you off track and make the meeting way long. And another really important part of running a meeting is to use basic parliamentary procedure. And there are 5 things on the screen there that are kind of the reasons behind why do we use parliamentary procedure in our meetings. One thing is that it kind of keeps everything in order. It makes sure that you're talking about one thing at a time. There's one thing being presented, being discussed, being voted upon, and you're not going back and forth between a bunch of different things. It also helps to make sure that everyone who wants to have a chance to participate has a chance to participate. And through that discussion, it helps promote fairness and make sure that everybody understands what's being discussed and voted on. And lastly, it allows those in the minority to be heard. They get to speak to their motion or against a motion. Even if they're in the minority, they still get to say what's on their mind. But it also allows the majority to decide, and that's the vote, and that's where the majority gets to make the decision. Erin, next one. So moving on with parliamentary procedure, one thing that kind of trips people up is the actual making of motions. And it's really not so hard. And again, this is a great place to use a script if you need to, and also to help your executive board and committee chairs, the people who will be making the motions, learn how to do it properly so that it goes smoothly. So motions are used to take actions on any kind of plan or program activity, anything that your unit is deciding that they want to do, especially with money being spent or scheduling of activities and things like that. There are 8 steps to making a motion. The first thing that happens is the person who wants to make the motion raises their hand or stands or kind of just waves, notifies the chair, which is president, that they would like to speak. And at that point, the president, the chair, recognizes that person, calls on them, says, Erin. And then the member would say, I move, and then they make their motion. So for instance, it might be, I move to hold a book fair the week of September 15th in the MPR. At that point, if somebody else in the room thinks, okay, well, that's an interesting idea, I'd like to hear more about that, somebody else seconds the motion. So they just say second. And by saying second, it doesn't mean that they agree with that motion. It just means that they want to hear more about it. They want there to be a discussion. So now that you have a motion and a second, the president repeats it. So the president would say, the motion is to hold a book fair the week of September, whatever I said, 15th in the MPR. Is there any discussion? And at that point, people get to discuss. Anybody who would like to. Usually you don't have things that is a lot of back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But if you do, you can limit it to say 4 people speaking for a motion, 4 people speaking against a motion. You can limit the amount of time. Sometimes that information is written right in your bylaws, how much time you will allow for discussion. That's a good place to look. And then after your discussion is over, the chair puts the motion to a vote, saying, okay, all those in favor say aye, all those opposed say no, and then whatever the result is, the chairperson announces the result. So they would say, the ayes have it, and the motion is adopted if it's in an association meeting. If it's in an executive board meeting, the motion is carried. And one thing that I didn't put in this slideshow that I'm now wishing I had, Erin, is that a lot of units use motion cards, and they're just a small half sheet of paper, has the date, what the meeting is, and it says right on there, I move, and then they just fill in the blank. And then to make them more comfortable, they can fill that out ahead of time. They can even show it to a couple other people to make sure that they have it worded right. And then when the time comes, they can stand and read it directly off the paper. And sometimes that really makes people feel a lot more comfortable. If you do not have motion cards at your unit, please let us know. We have samples that we can send to you digitally. They are very, very useful. And we can talk more about that in question and answers if anybody has any further questions.
All right, thank you, Leslie. One more thing I was going to touch on that on the motion cards is it also helps your secretary when taking minutes. They don't have to try and get that wording of the motion verbatim. They have it in front of them to enter in later or even during the meeting. So that's always just another tool that's handy. So after the meeting, once you've concluded your meeting, the president has called the meeting or adjourned the meeting, I should say. Be the last in the room, especially with the virtual right now. Be that person that leaves at the end. Wait, greet everyone, or not greet anyone, but thank you. Oh my goodness, thank them for attending. Be there in case they have questions. They want to talk with you and the board or talk to you one-on-one. Zoom has a really cool feature in which you can do breakout rooms and you can go talk to someone, if you wanted to send them off with one of your officers privately. Those are all really cool features right now, but even in person, just stay and be there for questions. Especially thank your people for attending. They didn't have to be there that night or that day in your meeting. Thank you, thank them for being there. Thank any guests that have come out to speak or any performers. A thank you goes a long way. Ask your secretary to send you the minutes as soon as possible. The longer we wait to do minutes, the more we forget what happened in that meeting. So it's best to always have the secretary do them while it's fresh in their head. Minutes should never be posted publicly. We talked about how we can email them and share them with people who will be attending our meeting, but you cannot put them up on Facebook. You cannot put them out for the masses to see. So those are just some tips on that. I think that pretty much sums up the business or what we wanted to present. We're going to move on to questions. And I'm going to check and see if we have any. We're on a slight delay from when we present to when it gets to you guys. It's a little bit of a delay. So we're going to wait just a couple of minutes and see if there's any questions. And if not, if something comes up later and you have a question, you can always reach out to us. We're always available to answer questions or assist. Sometimes you can't think of something in the moment and then something comes up later and you're like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot, or I totally remember now what I was going to say. So far, we're not seeing any. So we'll still be available, but I'll move on. These are our contact information if you need to reach out to us. I'll leave that up on the screen for a couple minutes. And like anything, thank you guys for being here tonight. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your willingness to learn, to hear what we have to say, and just for hanging in with us during this kind of unique time that we're all in. This is not the way I want to do a meeting. I'd rather be with all of you in person. I'd rather be seeing faces, but at least you're continuing to want to learn. And so that's huge for us and we appreciate that. So our next webinar is actually going to be next Wednesday. Originally it was going to be July 15th, but we had to move it up because it was the same night as state PTA is holding their virtual meetings. And we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to attend those. So our next one is going to be the first part of our seasons of PTA. It's a 4-part series. This part's going to take us through July, August, and September. How to end the year, how to start the year off, things you need to know coming into this term. Actually, we just ended the year, so it's all starting things off. Sorry. July is the beginning. July 1, welcome to the next term. And And that's going to be next week. Sorry, I got sidetracked. So July 8th at 7 p.m. You can register it for, oh my goodness, it's been a day, guys. I can't even talk anymore. Register at 34thpta.org. And we hope to see you for the next webinar. So nothing else. We are going to end this. Again, I can't thank you enough for being here. We're here for you guys if you need us. Reach out, and we will hopefully see you all sooner than later. So have a good evening. Leslie, you want to say bye?
Bye. Thank you all for coming. And please let us know if we can help you.
Good night, everyone. Have a good week. Oh, and happy 4th of July, by the way, too.